Hey, thanks for spending a little, allowing us to take a little extra time. Okay, so, just setting up technology things as well as some other kinds of updates on the computer, something that changed some things around, and so I had to change some things around, and I guess that makes it like just like real teaching. You plan something, and then all of a sudden, okay, well, that didn't go quite as I expected, but where do I see some potential? Much like the theme that we've had all week. So anyway, I'm really just very honored, as I said on Wednesday when everybody was here, to be able to continue to work with you. And you're gonna hate me because I'm gonna be moving around all sorts of places. Oh, okay. You can leave this one. That's all right. I think it saves my voice a little bit today. But as I said on Wednesday, you know, it's just really my pleasure to work with all of you and to help you think deeply about, you know, this culture of thinking that you're wishing to take a stand for whilst being here in this new endeavor here at Concept School. So anyway, I want to get your voices in the mix really quickly. You know, we've all been in different forums this week. I mean, Monday we were together, and Monday and then Wednesday we were all together in this space, all of us. And there I was really talking about, you know, okay, if we're trying to create a culture of thinking for kids, then how can we become a culture of thinking or continue to be a culture of thinking with one another? What will be some features and highlights for us to aspire to in terms of professional learning? And then people bringing artifacts just so that we can have something real on the table to look at and learn from. That was the Monday and Wednesday experience. All throughout the weekend, we've had learning labs that different ones of you have been a part of, either as one of the presenting teachers, which probably I should say, Vice, Camilla, oh, here's way there, Vice, Camilla, Anna Carol, the other Carol, you're up here, Thiago, is around.
He's playing.
He's playing something.
At a special event today.
Great. Camaro and who have I missed? Who else was one of our presenting teacher?
Okay.
That was it. Well, for all the presenting teachers, thank you once again for everything you did there. So you had those experiences, but the rest of you participated in that. So the Monday and Wednesday around professional learning, the learning labs, going into classrooms live, and conversations in between. I would really love it if you just reflect on the week for a moment and do a little writing to yourselves. It looks like you've got something to document on. But as a result of this week, or as inspired by this week, what ideas from this week have resonated with you somehow, some way? You know, what's something that came up in that learning lab or in the Wednesday artifact session or even the parent session or any of the other conversations? What ideas have connected to ideas that you were already holding, that you've already heard about teaching and learning, developing, understanding? What was something this week that maybe extended your thinking in some way, pushed it further or deeper? Why don't I go quiet for a moment? Gives us all a chance to breathe, reflect. We'll let silence do the heavy lifting. I'll go off mic so that you can just do your own writing for a moment before we turn to talking. We've got a few thoughts to down, and I'm sure for as long as the space that we create here, the more you can write. If you've got one or two things, that's probably enough for now. Yeah, I do, and it looks like the person next to you might have one or two things to share. But if you could just partner up with the one person next to you, rather than a group of four. My only worry about a group of four is one person talks, and then one person talks, and then person three and person four don't ever get a chance to do their sharing. And so I'd just rather you partner up with somebody if you can, and just share. What are some of your takeaways from the week? What's resonated with you, given our experiences as a direct result for some of our interactions this week? What's something that really connected with beliefs you already have about teaching and learning? What's one thing that maybe extended your thinking somehow, somehow? Just partner up with somebody and have that kind of general reflection.
Yeah. So, something that theoretical part of you really connect with the side you practice a little more, like more details and see that it works. The part that extended my thinking was the part that I mentioned where that is not you need to make like a listen to it. To make sure that
Yeah, I have. I've got one.
We're back. Let's send it work on.
So I'd like to jump back in with us if we could. Come together as a whole group. Don't want to squander this opportunity. I mean, I know it's in your day-to-day, Monday through Friday. Now, I've had a chance to live that alongside you, and I know I never even see that person because they're over there and I'm over here. And so while we're in this collective space, it's good for the group to start tuning into. Yeah, we had ideas and hopes and dreams and things when we were in um, that showroom in front of the school back before the kids arrived. But now we're down the track a little bit. So it'd be really curious, kind of as a group, for us to start tuning into what are some of the connections people are having in terms of our efforts here to create a culture of thinking and sustain that to develop it. What's extended for us in our thinking this week? Can we hear from one or two voices? Some of the big themes that may be coming up.
I think for me,
And talk with our groups.
most the something that Suhi both talked about, it was the importance of collaboration and having this moments to share and learn from each other in a more maybe structured way.
And what about that? I mean, because I can also imagine you in February saying, yes, collaboration is important. So
Yeah.
what is it about collaboration this time that you think it's really struck us in this kind of way?
I think having this opportunity to be inside somebody else's classroom is very, very helpful, because then we can see we see the some issues that we have in our own classroom. We can learn from each other, and I think having moments to share and having somebody to give ideas how to deal with things that we have in our classroom, or sharing how they are doing and how they are dealing. I think we can move forward in a faster way and in a easier way.
So stepping inside somebody else's shoes gives me
Yes,
other ideas,
yes.
helps me see common struggles, common dilemmas.
And the protocol.
And speak with that idea.
And the protocol of having the first meeting and talking about which glasses we're going to put on when we go and observe the others. And I felt it was the conversation was always very respectful, but not only because people were there from a good place, but especially the questions that were posed and the protocol itself would make the whole situation a very collaborative situation. Like, you are also in charge of the lesson. I was there performing the lesson, but everybody somehow helped with some ideas. Everybody had the sense of ownership, and it made a whole difference. So I understand that sometimes we think collaboration is only observing, but what observation will it be? What glasses am I going to put on?
And it's really, we can share stories with one another in the hallways and have conversation. That's fine and good, and questions can come up there. But when we have a shared experience together, let's say stepping in a classroom to study it, not just as a flyby, then from that shared experience, maybe some other questions start to come up that we didn't even know to ask when we're just listening to somebody's recollection.
And then we're going in not to critique, right? And not to look at, oh, how that person is doing things wrong or something like that. No, we are part of it. As you said, we are all here together. So if somebody is not, let's say, failing, it's everybody's fault, because we had that ownership before. So we were all working together, and we were there. We can see the problems, and we're thinking about how to improve them, and not point out things that the person did wrong. I think that's most important.
Something else that's coming up, what will we do?
No, I was just going to make a connection with what you said, but
Okay, well, how about some other kinds of things that have resonated for folks this week? For this collaboration piece and what that could offer us, if it creates a space for us to see perspectives and raise more questions. Carol, if you'll share with the group.
I thought after doing the learning lab, I was thinking that, because my challenge on Monday was the same as Camila's, right? Sometimes you think of students don't think deep enough. And then after the lab and then talking with my group, do we allow time for them to reflect enough? Because what I realized is that we do the culture of thinking when we are doing the routines. When we're not doing the routines, what do we do? So that's what stuck for me after the learning lab.
And what's your gut telling you on that front now?
That we It's not only at that time, right? We have to have this culture throughout the day, so from when they arrive to when they go home.
What I wrote connects a lot what you said, because in my age group, I connect a lot with regularly approach, which it's not routine, but it tells us about the visible thinking, like, make sure thinking happens in many different ways, because in our age group, they don't speak anyone, they're thinking to see that they are able to show their thinking through our actions in many different ways. All the time. So in my age group, the routines are kind of hard, so we have to adapt everything. So it's not only through routines we make thinking visible. So this thinking is visible in every action we perform. So I reflect a lot about our intentionalities, right, in teaching. So and resonates with your speech for parents education conference. Thinking how does it happen all the time? Like they're always making connections, not only restricted like activities, because we can perform activities here. We're having proposal sessions like deep moments for learning. So it's not only throughout into things that they think, they're thinking all the time.
Yeah.
You just have to make sure we're observing.
Just mirroring back a little bit on these comments too, I think that's a pretty good place for individuals to come to, but also for the group to start thinking about just, doing making thinking visible, MTV or VTR or VTs, I think is what you guys are calling it. That has a certain kind of flavor to it. I'm doing a thinking routine. With a capital T, capital R. But there is kind of an interesting thing. Just how am I making my students' thinking routine? Or how am I making my students' thinking visible? That's a smaller case N, a smaller case T, a smaller case V. Just when and where could I make students' thinking visible on this? And what difference would it make for them with the experience or the provocation that's in front of them? And what kind of thinking would I like them to make visible for my benefit? Because I actually don't know what's inside their heads. And so I want to ask about that. I want to pull that out. I heard you say animals and people have this exchange. We heard that in one classroom. Well, tell us a little bit more. What do you mean by exchange? Because the kid has got some thinking there, and that's that moment where that's so much more than just doing a routine, but it's about taking a stance, right? Certainly the routines help us to make thinking visible, but even beyond routines, just where do we take that stance? So we're always on the ready for that, so we don't miss the moments. We're going to spend some time this afternoon playing around with that, or during the day playing around with that. Just wanted to just hear maybe one other comment. We've heard some things about collaboration and also the nature of it's making thinking visible with capital letters, but making thinking visible with smaller case. Lucy, have some reflections for the group?
Just one thing that we were talking about doing.
You have to use loud voice for our friends.
Some comments that we had during class collaboration, and that it's my mind that we often want to our think. It's not that we want to put our thinking into kids' head, but we want them to see our perspective of things so that we guide them through standards and so on. One thing that made me think and wonder was that instead of trying to, okay, this is the standard, this is the objectives, the key knowledge and stuff, instead is when they are doing some thinking, we should try to get that thinking into our heads and see how we can apply their own thinking into our teaching. And that made me think that that collaboration that we were doing throughout the week, not just for our benefit. The more we collaborate, the more there are different perspectives into that planning, the richer will be the benefit for the students. And their thinking will
while making their thinking abilities would be much more organic, because if we are now doing a See, Think, and Wonder, we are now doing a Connect, Extend challenge. If we see different ways how to propose that exchange, then learning will be more organic. It won't be so mechanical for this case, because as you said in the lecture for the parents, they are used to a certain script learning. And that script was taken away from them. And now they're relearning how to see that they are actually learning. And I'm wondering here if we are all the time saying, we are doing the same thing in Wonder. We are now going to do this and this and that. For them, it's like, what are you doing? All the time they should be learning something new and new and new. And it's not that they are learning something new. It's different approaches in how they're learning. So I'm here, I think that it was very rich this week that we could collaborate. And then I thought, oh yeah, we don't need to be doing that. We can just sit everybody together to see the different perspective for that same subject, and kids, they'll be able to learn in a much more organic way, that you don't need to be naming and pinpointing what they're doing. So that was some food for thought, and how we can broaden that for their own benefit.
Well, let me jump in with you on that. I think that's a reflection out there. Just, we want kids to feel like their voice matters, their input matters, and with the organic nature of that. And so we don't need to be noticing and naming. Well, I'm going to approach that one with a little bit of caution. But it's more like when might we notice and name? Because if we do, and now we're going to do the see, then all of a sudden it just feels like it's an activity we're going to complete. As opposed to, guys, let's think about our experiences that we've had here this week in this unit of inquiry that we're in. Why don't you just get down a few notes? How is some of the experiences connected with some of the ideas you already pulled? How is some of the experiences we've had extended your thinking in some way? Maybe took it in a new and further deeper direction. I can see myself doing that for 5th graders or 5-year-olds. I can see myself doing that with a group of my learners on a Saturday morning. When I'm just very, very curious. We've had some experiences this week. I'm really curious what's connecting. You see, and now, guys, we're going to do the VT routine Connect Extend challenge on Creating a Culture. You see, I didn't need to announce it, but I've also named it. See, so play around with that idea. Like, what kind of noticing and naming are we doing? What kind of opportunities does a routine like connecting? Like, what kind of opportunities would that create for learners so that they can get their heads in a space rather than just saying, I really like the week, or I really like that field trip. Well, okay, that's a kind of reflection, but I'm not so sure that's very helpful for me to really know how did that have effect on your learning. So in some ways, I'm asking, how did that connect with what we've been studying about already? How did that extend our thinking in some way? I'm doing that for the learner's benefit, but I'm also doing it for my benefit. It's helpful for me to be able to get a routine in place. I mean, this was familiar. We didn't have to do 16 lessons on Connect Extend Challenge. We could just do, right? And this was also a moment as you talk with one another. Think about what I'm doing in that situation. I'm also just kind of listening. I mean, I've got some big ideas that I've got some standards, if you will. Maybe you don't think I have any standards, but I do. No, I've got some things in my mind that I want to put in front of you, but I'm also kind of listening in that moment. So part of the use of thinking routines, and once it becomes routine, seamless, it just becomes something that flows, if you will. Think about what that could buy you. Think about what that could buy the students. In other words, the payoff. When looking for connections and extensions, it's just a matter of routine. We just do that a lot. Then they can do that at will when they're on that field trip, or when they're listening to this guest speaker, or interacting with the refugees that are serving them foods from their country. Once it becomes routine, then it's theirs. But also once it becomes routine for us, just think about the listening opportunities it might start to create for us. kind of connected onto what Carol was saying, that, I'm worried about the kids aren't going deep enough, but maybe one of the underlying causes why they're not going deep is, have I really given them time to go deep? Or have I really listened to what they said so that I can really push for that? And there's nothing wrong with any of us to have these puzzles, but puzzles can drive our inquiry. So having said that, I'd just like to build on. I mean, there's so much to say. We'll say what we need to say for today and learn what we need to learn for today. But I just really appreciate kind of the tenacity, the persistence that you're bringing to this. It was fine in February to say, oh, that's good. That would be clever. I can do that with my students. Now you've been living it for a while. And you're thinking, okay, well, how do I make this kind of thinking accessible if my children don't have their tongues around English yet, and we're all speaking English in this school? How do I make this accessible for kids who really wish to never even be seen or noticed in a classroom, and very fine to defer to those that dominate the conversation? How do we do this when I've got very young children or old children who are like so over adults telling them what to do? There's just all the mix of real life that comes with this enterprise. So I appreciate you just sticking with this, and we'll grow it even more. I want to come back to some ideas here, though, as we push forward this morning. I didn't copyright those pictures or anything like that. I just thought they were so lovely. I didn't ask you if I could put a picture on. If that's not beautiful. So, I just want to bring up to this idea, though, everybody. There's a couple of things. I mean, why you're a school that's just getting so much going, getting so much started. So why even pay attention to this? Well, a couple of things that are driving our interactions here in this space. I brought this up the other day, and I'll continue to bring it up every time I see you. But again, if we want classrooms to be rich places of collaboration for kids, then what shoes do we walk in that really mirror that? If we want kids to be perspective seekers and complexity uncoverers and close observers and curious, then how are we a culture that invites that amongst ourselves? And lots of schools get busy with all the stuff that needs to be implemented, and then you're busy just like any other school. But if you just get busy with just getting through the stuff, the classrooms will start to look like that. And so we really want to attend to this. For classrooms to be rich cultures of thinking for kids, then how will we have a constant reconvening, a constant recommitment to be the culture of thinking for ourselves? In the hallways, in our table conversations at lunch, but then in study sessions. I think that was a little bit of a bump up this week. Either a study session like going into classroom reflection, or just bringing artifacts from our efforts. What did I bring? Why did I bring it? What's it saying to me? There's another little adage that I want to put out for your consideration too, and why I think it's always important to keep rallying around these ideas. We know this, that teachers teach to their deepest held core beliefs and values. Other people's ideas about what's most important to promote, that can't be easily adopted wholesale. So Priscilla can come in and say, we're teaching for understanding. I can say, look, teaching for understanding, we're making thinking visible, and here's why that's important. And I think there's a role for the director to invite that space, and for Catherine and Eric to help to support that. For all of it's important for us to put these ideas out there. But at the end of the day, what you do in your classroom, you can't just take my perfectly grand idea and make it and just buy it, hook and see, you might say. Like, I'll just give you a list and that's what you're going to follow. You gotta make sense of these ideas for yourself, and we want to acknowledge that. And this is where sometimes other schools that I work with get maybe a little frustrated, especially with the time that it takes to develop this culture of thinking. Sometimes in other schools where the school leaders will say, I told the teachers to do these thinking routines and they're just not doing it, or something like that. I didn't hear that here. I want to make sure that I've made that very clear publicly. But what I'm saying is, this is just the point. You can't just tell somebody, make your students think invisible, and they're like, okay, that's what I shall believe. You know? You have to create the conditions to say, well, you know, you already knew a lot about teaching and learning before you even walked on this campus. You've all had experiences working with young learners or older learners in other places, other bilingual schools. I know several of you have come from that. So you didn't come into this place blank. You've already got a list of beliefs, values, and things. And I think this school has hired you because of what you're bringing. At the same time, as you interact with these ideas, how do these things help to form even more ideas for you? How does it take you to an even better place? We want to honor the fact that teachers don't teach other people's lists of importance. Teachers are going to teach that which they value on the inside. And so that's where I think even more like the collaboration or the questions we can push into one another, recognizing, ooh, are we the ones that are making this a little tricky for the kids? Can we kind of soften it, make it more organic? It's only when teachers study together that we start to kind of reevaluate our beliefs and values. I just remember in our last study group yesterday, with that learning lab format, you know, the teacher there, I feel safe to say this, we were in Chiaco's classroom, he said, you know, I really changed my idea on that. I thought it first had to start with me. I didn't think to turn it over to them, but by giving that a try, I was really surprised by what they did do. You know, that was an aha moment in that moment. And so that would be a forever lesson to keep thinking, just where do I hold on to something? Where do I turn it over? If I turn it over too soon, it might be a mess. If I never turn it over, then it might be an act of compliance. Like, these are the questions that teachers keep rallying around. So creating a culture of thinking is so much more than a set of techniques to implement. It's a stance to take. And I suppose that anti-goal of all of this is that years from now, somebody comes on this campus and says, paying attention to kids thinking. And any of you who are still at the school say, oh yeah, paying attention to kids thinking. Yeah, we used to do that. We used to do that when Mark Church came. We used to do that when Priscilla was with Ray. Like, that's the anti-goal. That's the not goal. I don't have any eloquent way of saying that in English. That's just like not the goal. That's so not the goal. Right? I mean, there will be times and places where school leaderships will move to other places. There'll be a day that I'm not darkening the doors as close as I get to right now in this period of time. You will move on to other schools from this school at some point. Some of you, some of you will stay for a while. But the goal is just, how am I making my students think invisible? That's something I can do in here and now and take with me wherever I go. We don't want it to be, I used to do that. Because that, in my ears, that's code word for that was a program to implement, rather than a stance to take. Programs come and go, and sometimes programs need to live their course and then move on. But the enterprise of being curious about what's inside kids' heads, like that's something I can keep doing, whether I'm working at this school or any school. A more open school that allows for deep inquiry. You may find yourself someday at another school that maybe is more traditional, more prescribed for whatever reason, life circumstance takes you that way. But even in that situation, I can still be curious about what's inside kids' heads. And so that's where I want to keep coming back. We're always thinking about the culture of thinking for our kids and for each other. Now, I want to push forward a little bit with you, if I may. And I want to talk about some key learnings when thinking becomes routine. Because I think I saw elements of these learnings already in the mix in these very early days from what I saw in classrooms and in conversations I've been having. I've also seen places where, I think the folks at Concept Campus, they're close to this. So some of it's already kind of, you've got versions in the works, and others you're very, very close to this. And so I want to just put this out there again, just to push you beyond the edge of kind of where you're working now. And also acknowledging, play is the greatest form of research. I saw that on one of the walls somewhere. Priscilla likes those sayings everywhere, doesn't she? That's her thing. Like that. We can talk about her because she's not in the room. Oh, she could be watching right now. Sorry, Priscilla. She may have me on her phone. But what I say, it's early days. Some of you are still playing, getting the right fit, you know. That's A-okay. That's normal. So if you're not quite at some of these learnings yet, or you don't know quite where to get this in place yet, there's nothing wrong with you. I just want to kind of give you a vision, because you're close to this if you're not quite there yet. Here's what I've noticed in other places when thinking becomes more that seamless thing, that more flow, that more organic thing. I've seen qualities like this. Initially, thinking routines often start off as activities. They feel like activities. But in order for them to work over time, they have to be seen as integrated and purposeful for the teacher and for the students. It's that purpose, that integration. I said this, and I'm probably repeating for some of you because different reflection learning labs this week, I've said different things. And so I don't want to be redundant, but I didn't say this for everybody. I sometimes think about the use of routines, sort of like the initial use is almost like when I put on this pullover this morning. When I put it on first thing, I felt it for the first 60 seconds. You know, then I went in, I brushed my teeth and kind of got my papers around. And actually by the time I left the hotel room, and even right now, I don't feel like I'm wearing the sweater now. It fits. It just, you know, the seams have aligned. I've been able to shrug my shoulders a bit. The sleeves don't feel so stuck underneath the sweater sleeves. I think that's like the use of thinking routines. At first, I feel it when I first put it on. The second time through, I'm still kind of feeling it. By the time we've done this third time or fourth time, now it just, this is the moment where a little seeing, thinking, wondering makes sense, or connect, extend, challenge. You see, some of those routines that have been your tried and true or your go-tos, that's almost like you try that sweater on and now you're just wearing it. So initially it feels like an activity, but now it's starting to feel more integrated, purposeful. I don't have to, and now we're going to do this, we just do it. So that's one thing. If you're not quite there yet, then just keep that in mind. Another learning. Thinking routines become routines only once the edges are softened just a little bit. And the students and teachers can start working flexibly with that routine. It's linked to the first learning up there. But sometimes people say, Mark, I changed this routine a little bit. Is that okay? Mark, I adapted this routine a little bit. Is that okay? And in my mind, I always think, well, yeah, maybe yes, and maybe no. And maybe you respect me say, of course, adapt as you like. Here's my maybe yes, maybe no. I always think, have you kept the spirit, the intention of, let's say, okay, so see, think, wonder is about looking closely and developing theories. Do you, whatever adaptation you make, do you still have that essence in that? Like zoom in. Yesterday, our friend Thiago wanted to try zoom in for the first time. It was new for him, right? And so we got to talking, okay, zoom in is about looking at details, looking for whole, looking at details, looking for whole. But he needed to make some adaptations. What would work for, what was it, your class, right? Complete theory. Okay, so doing a full-blown zoom in routine like we did with that, I think we did it with the image from the Japanese American internment camp. Right? So he's not going to do that. So he made adaptations, but he kept the integrity. So that's what I would watch out for. You know, don't feel like you can't soften the edges a little bit. But I worry when people feel like, oh, the kids can't do this, so I have to change this right now. And then all of a sudden it actually then made it an activity to complete rather than the spirit of the. I know some of you who was doing 3, 2, 1 bridge. Right. So on that 3, 2, 3 words, 2 questions, 1 analogy. Okay, so you're kind of playing around, and Carol was playing around. An analogy, they might not get that. So how about an example as a suggestion or just an image? So that was a really healthy place where, okay, maybe I just want to play it out as it is right now and then just see and then decide what adaptations to make. Or in this case, maybe I want to look at that up front So feel free to do that, but also caution yourself. Am I making a change too soon that maybe doesn't need to be made? Perceive, no, care about. Conrado, you were trying to step inside. And you were changing some of the language there because I don't know if the kids will know what perceive is. Maybe not, but maybe in that case, maybe I'll just put it out there and see what I get and then decide what adaptations to make. That's a long-winded way of saying, of course, make adaptations, but are you keeping true to the integrity? And two, are you making an adaptation too soon? Sometimes if you just float something out just a little bit and then decide what adaptations you want to make, you might want to give yourself some patience there. There's not a hard and fast rule for that. Honestly, these ideas in your hands, no one's worried about that. You guys are doing good things with these ideas. But just watch that. When I'm making an adaptation, have I maybe made it too soon? I would just caution on that. But at the same time, don't feel like you can't. Because the intent, like your comment was there. It's like, yeah, what's the intention here? And then there's lots of ways to kind of live the intention. And that's the healthy adaptation in here. A third key learning, in the classrooms, it's not just the routines themselves, but it's the interactions around the routines that make them so powerful. Doing the routine is one thing, but it's really the interactions it creates for these two girls as they're talking, or this table of kids while they're talking, the interactions I can have as I'm listening in. We all revisited that video of Lisa Fikirk with her 5th grade at the parent night, or the parent afternoon, that see, think, wonder. Okay, so there's that routine, but it was that interaction. You notice some things about Lisa's interaction. It's not like she's just this wonderful being. Well, she is actually. She's watching on that. Because the routine was in place, it wasn't just the routine. Those kids worked with that routine so much. Now, Lisa could really think about her interactions so that she could really push for that depth. Oh, so what is this here? What is it? Oh, what are you trying to say with this? Oh, you think they might be being forced to work? What did you say? What did you see that makes you say that? That interaction that she was doing there is where now the routine takes on that organic quality, and it's so much more than the routine, it's the culture. So I saw versions of all of this in the classrooms this week, in every classroom. And I also saw places where if it's not quite there yet, it's close, and certainly the intention is there. But what I'd like to do with, well, no, I don't want to just keep talking. I do want to share a couple of classroom examples where this is the case and where this isn't quite the case. But before I go, why don't you turn and talk? You need a chance to relieve your ears from my voice and get your voice in the mix. What makes sense here to you? What's resonating? What's piquing your interest? Why don't I just, you must have some response. Have a response and I'll be quiet.
The second one is very strong, because it's so challenging and with the love was it just okay. I will forget to say they keep on and I'm gonna change everything and just let me also choosing a properly team that may be a bad because not only the learning I was taught what do you see and what do you think you see and the great that you see the video from when Thursday and we could see that the fire was being made so I think this point is very important to us, not to think we just the fire and for me, that needs a lot of reflection. The first one is kind of a situation, especially during this is how we use it. If this needs to be done, let's do it. So we put it in practice. But then it's about the listening, it's about how you are using that thinking that you make visible to improve the learning. I'm not making it visible in how you then give value, how you then use it to make sure that you expand very powerful learning each other by themselves and now they know that how to way of learning. This is strange for them because learning for them saving up also just exercising. So they can impression of learning because they are not you get direct so that that's the way they use we feel something how the table together yes for a while. Not exactly at the same
It comes up back in with you.
but it's not.
So you've got some responses and some reactions around this. I don't put these learnings out there to make anyone feel gotcha, I'm not there yet, or something like that. I don't want anybody to feel like that. I put them out there, or to whip anybody into a frenzy. This is what we've been learning in other places, and maybe that's why, because these ideas have lived out in other places longer than they have here, we can learn from that. We start to see this happen once thinking becomes routine rather than just doing the routines. I know in your reading, your July reading, so it's going to invite you to take a look at the last chapters of Making Visible. Chapter 7 and 8, those are the ones that never get touched because people read the first chapters to get them started, and then the middle section, then they get into all the routines, and then the last chapters, people say, well, why didn't you ever tell us about that? We did, it's there. But really, chapter 7 and 8 really are getting into this notion of just notes from the field, lessons we've been learning, and then ways forward that people have taken it once they've kind of gotten over their initial just taste of some things. I think that because Priscilla was asking what kind of reading would be, not an add-on for people, but really fit with where they're at. So, I wouldn't jump to another book right now. I would kind of stay there because I think you'll see yourself a lot in those chapters. And maybe it's another way of collaborating with other people who have common struggles and dilemmas and so on and so forth. With this in mind, with some of these learnings, I want to have an experience. We'll go up to the morning break and then we'll carry the experience over after the morning break. But, you know, I go into lots of classrooms these days, and I've been wondering about these learnings. You know, why does this become the norm in some places, and why in other places we'll just not get there? How is this happening in some places and not in others? You know, what have I seen or noticed in classrooms where this is the case, and what have I seen and noticed in classrooms that isn't the case? So we're going to have a tale of two classrooms, if you will. You know, here's a classroom and here's a classroom, and you know, this person, I use thinking routines all the time. This person saying, I use thinking routines all the time. And I get to go into those classrooms, and I always learn from that. But I often am left with questions around certain things and phenomena. You know, just because the classroom says, oh, we use thinking routines, another school, we use thinking routines, that doesn't necessarily mean I know what the whole story is until we kind of start to look at all the other stuff around the routine and think, why is it stagnating here, or where is it, or why is that organic flow happening in other places? So we're gonna look at two classrooms. Here's my little worry. Because I'm always telling you about my worries today. So worry. You're still worried. And then I had to tell you that I had standards, and you were like, he doesn't have standards. Seriously, it's Saturday. Here's my worry on this slide. We're going to go into classroom 1, and then we'll go into classroom 2 after the break. And we've got a whole arc that we'll be on in this experience. As soon as I put a classroom 1 and a classroom 2 up there is a tendency to already pit them against one another. It's classroom 1 versus classroom 2. I don't think that's very helpful. In fact, it's not helpful at all. Classroom 1 is going to play out different than classroom 2. You know which country I come from. In my sort of nation's narrative, it's always good guys and bad guys. We're the good ones, and everybody else is the bad ones, evidently. You know, winners and losers. In this case, I think that's not helpful. It's not like classroom 1 is the loser and classroom 2 is the winner. It's not like one is evil and one is hero. I think it's just important to step in different kinds of classrooms and as a place of analysis, reflection, collaboration. What's going on here? Where's their promise and where's their potential? You know, in the things that move along swimmingly, we have to understand what's making it powerful so we can do that more and more. In the places that are stagnated or a little chop, 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 we've got to get in there and not just brush it off and say that was terrible. We have to get in what's causing it to stagnate, and then where's the potential forward. So if you can approach it with that mind, but I think via your learning labs this week, you're already kind of primed for that. So let's step in these classrooms here, because I do think that the experiences here could have some resonance with your ongoing efforts with your own students. So classroom 1, some years ago, I was doing some work. I lived overseas for a number of years, and then I moved back to the States on this side of things. And I was working with a lot of high schools actually in New York City, where they were really working with their population to make sure that those kids stayed connected with school, because these kids were having struggles with school, and they were on the road to dropping out. And so the schools I was working with, they had that kind of parameter there. These kids were pretty marginalized from school, and teachers were trying to get them a place in. And so this particular school, the teachers were working with some thinking routines. This was early days of thinking routines. And with this class, they were reading the book To Kill a Mockingbird. Are people familiar with that book here? Yeah. Okay, so, I mean, it's been around for years, and it's set in the American South, and a man of color is accused of a crime and put on trial, but a crime that he didn't commit. So it has lots of themes of prejudice and advocacy and standing up against injustice and so on and so forth. If you're not familiar with the book, that's probably enough. Anyway, his class were reading To Kill a Mockingbird. They've been reading it for a while. It was his 9th grader, so these are kids that are 14, turning 15. And he thought, oh, see, think, wonder. Like lots of teachers, they always grab onto that. That would be good for them. So they had been reading the book for a while, and this was his first attempt, right? Trying something they had never done before. You guys can have some empathy with that. We saw that here this week. Okay? So bring that, listen with empathy in this one as well. He went to the internet, he did some Google searching to find a good image, and he found this image here, and he wanted to do a sea pink wonder. It's beige. Could you just turn off that light so we have a little bit of contrast there? Yeah, that's good. So he's got his ninth graders in front of him. They've not done the routine before. He's not done the routine. It's a first time for. I'm also in the room, and for whatever reason, that can either make people really pleased or very nervous, whatever. But I was in there just observing. So what do you see was the first thing he asked. Actually, that would be a good practice for you, just for just a couple of moments before we look at kids' responses. Why don't you just quickly write down 4 things that you see? You know you see it if you can come put your finger on it. I'm going to be very stickler. We're being very descriptive, very literal. So if you say, I see a necktie, I would say, come put your finger on it. And Camilla could easily come up and put a finger on that guy's necktie. If you say, I see segregation, I'm going to say, come put your finger on segregation. Where do I point for that? Okay, whatever I point to for that, then describe that. That's the literal thing you see. Segregation is an interpretation. Right? So just quickly write down 4 things you literally see. Just quickly, take no more than 60 seconds to do that. If you feel like you're being literal, that's about right. Once you have your 4 things, and the people at your table have their 4 things, share those 4 things pretty quickly with one another. Purpose. Why are we doing that? Part of that is so that we can all notice lots of features. I mean, I'll notice the things I notice, but somebody else could see something that I might not be seeing at first. And it helps us, it readies ourselves to see as much as we can. So really point out to each other all the different things that you can see. If your friend sounds like they've interpreted something, don't say, no, that's interpretation, because they're not gonna like that on Saturday morning. And you're not gonna get a good friend in that either. So think of a gentle way of saying that. Well, what did you see that makes you say that? That would be a good moment for us. I don't have to be the only one in the room that says that. So just self-check yourself there. And other people don't get frustrated. We're really just honing in on that habit, because this is a habit I want you guys to get good at, just looking. Okay? So share with each other your list and try to notice as much as you can in the photo, and then I'm going to show you some kids' responses.
Okay, I saw that too. Okay. White men standing. A group of white people behind him, and a group of black people on above him. Oh no, I did not. Maybe I read your mind. I see white people black people standing. Oh, what makes you say that? I did not see that picture. That's it. I didn't see any of the young people seated. I'm not sure if the picture is clear enough, but
Yeah, that's
in my
true.
perspective, that's clear. Maybe not. Looks like maybe not. Yes, maybe not. Okay, they are upstairs on the balcony. I see a hat and I see a man.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in with you if I could, please. Sorry, I know that's, maybe not everybody got a chance, but let's just start pointing out some of the features. You probably checked yourselves a little bit where maybe you didn't even realize you were interpreting, but just what did I see that makes me say that? That's gonna be good for us as learners. I want us to get good at that. See, I would even say that with kids. I want us to get good at looking and then really just looking. So what were some of the things that people were seeing? Let me hear some of the things. Now, people. Okay, can we get more descriptive? What's that?
A man standing.
I see a man standing. Okay, something else. I see a hat on the table. Something else.
A balcony up there.
I see a balcony. I see what? A man in glasses.
Pillars.
I see pillars.
Chair.
What's that?
Chair.
I see a chair. Oh, over here.
I see white people sitting on the balcony.
Yeah, you can say that. So you see white people sitting here on this mezzanine or the ground level. Can you even describe even more? Yeah. And you were going to.
And black people on the top part.
Okay, so then I see black people or people of color up here. Is it all black people up there?
No.
No? Where? Oh, so you do see a white person there, or it appears to. The image is a little grainy, isn't it?
Seems like a child.
That it seems like a child. So there's maybe a white child, maybe one more white child there. What makes you think child? The posture, maybe the arms dangling over.
Like informal.
Maybe so. Oh, and their feet.
Yeah.
Feet sticking through the rails.
Yeah.
So again, one of the things that we're doing here is just noticing lots of things in this image. This is how it played out in this gentleman's classroom. Let me help you because, or let me help you paint this scenario of classroom 1. Okay, they've been reading the book. He wanted to try see think wonder with them. He shows them this image, and he asked them. He said, "So, guys, what do you see?" And they said this. We see a man in a suit with glasses. We see a white man. We see the inside of a large room. We see a hat on the table. We see white people and black people. All the white people are sitting or standing on the ground floor. All the people of color are in the balcony. Okay, much like our conversation was going there, right? Very descriptive. And so then the teacher's name was Burke, and Burke said, "Okay, guys, well, what do you think is going on here?" And the room was quiet. And then somebody said, "Well, it's the courtroom scene from To Kill a Mockingbird." To which the teacher said, "Well, what makes you say that?" And the 14-year-old said, "Because we're reading To Kill a Mockingbird." And so then the teacher thought, okay, what's the next question I'm supposed to ask? Okay, what does this make you wonder? And the room was quiet. And then somebody said, "I wonder if it's To Kill a Mockingbird." That's how the scenario played out. And there's some real questions around that because that's not the only time I've seen that phenomenon. I'd like to have some conversation at your table, and then we'll go a whole group. What's going on here? What's your read of the situation? He doesn't need you to be his inspector or his czar, but like in the Spirit of Learning Labs this week. Okay, what has, okay, that didn't go exactly as we were expecting, but here's where I see some potential. What's your read? What's the problems really? And then what seems promising? What seems problematic? Where's their potential? talk with your table there for a moment, because you know this To Kill a Mockingbird syndrome. Talk with your table.
It's a way to insert technology in education. Some with the best and off that is that the first level is comfortable. So if you never tried before, it's okay with your first try. You it's just so something you read back in the paper and read they just try it, so you go for it, and analyze it, think about it, and go to it. Maybe the question, so welcome later, right? Because we are really how to say, and then oh, and what makes you say that? Oh no, what do you wonder? Maybe you should ask for evidence. Where do you see? Yeah.
So it was an activity. Because many students should know there was an activity for students. And then what students, especially middle school, try to do is to match the questions that teachers would get to the things that teachers
One trivia. That was what I was going to say. I think he used that thing and the wonder, using the things that they brought up. Like, why do you think the land is there? Why do you think white people are down and black people are up? What does it make you wonder? Then they would come up with their thinking and their ideas. He just asked random questions. He did not listen to the first part. And then just as that is saying, they were trying to guess what he wanted. And then not what they
not
wanted.
only that it's brilliant, that it seems like that it seems like it's not everything. It's promising that the boy, the girl, whatever, they are used to this situation that they're doing. But maybe the first part, what do you think here? They start to more instead of what makes you say that or what makes a particle and then you go to the description of a particle, then what happens? Maybe trying to wonder
Ladies and gentlemen, it's okay.
And they exchange the story behind.
So in the spirits of teachers being a culture of thinking with one another, teachers being reflective with each other, considering budding perspectives and possibilities. I always think when people bring real work to the table, whether you bring an artifact or there's a class observation or you bring a piece of student work that you're looking at, whenever we have that stimulus there, it's never about fixing that person. It's about growing our practice. Okay, so This guy will be the first to say, look, I know that didn't go as planned. It was the first time through it, right? So we don't have to fix him. He's okay. But I think it's good for us as teachers, as learners, to really think, well, okay, what's our read of the situation here? You get multiple reads. And why am I a big believer in multiple reads? Because if it's one read, then it's, oh, well, then that's your solution there. Well, but if that's not what the real underlying cause was, then maybe there are other possibilities that we just limited ourselves from. So let's get multiple reads here. What's going on? What's your read of the situation? What seems promising? What could the problem be? We're going to get a few voices here, because you're just the people who can do that. Who'll start us off? What's one thing that's on your mind?
That the challenge didn't exchange the knowledge.
The children didn't?
Because they have this this connection already with the text they were studying about, but the questions the teacher made and the picture didn't give the opportunity to exchange the knowledge.
Okay, so you're thinking maybe the opportunity was limited. Maybe they've read too much of the book and therefore the exchange was too limited there. I mean, what do you think's going on here? It's To Kill a Mockingbird. What makes you say that? Because we're reading To Kill a Mockingbird. What does this make you wonder? Are we wondering if it's To Kill a Mockingbird? You see this? Maybe it's that. Let's elaborate on that. Some other kinds of reads. Yeah.
I think it's actually, I like the first exchange because it's an accurate read from the students. They're making the right connection. It is a simple To Kill a Mockingbird, and the students are thinking the right way, but I think what is problematic is to just stay with that without pushing it any further. And I think you could face that with humor, because that's what, like, I think we all laugh because as teachers we know that's not what we are expecting when we ask what do you think is going on here. But the connection the student made is valid and it's accurate, right? And we could, I think I would do that, or maybe that is a possibility that I would explore. I would laugh, it's like, yeah, you're right. It is To Kill a Mockingbird, you're right. We're reading about that, but what else? What else can we talk about?
Yeah, who can build on? Like, what's another read of the situation? I also think that they're also laughing, or they had a giggle and chuckle because they've also had this experience. It's not just because that's a funny scenario in itself. I'd be very surprised if everybody who's used the CP1 in this room hasn't had that same experience. But what's your read of the situation? Where were some problematic aspects to explore?
I was thinking about
Speak loud
the expected and the unexpected, because he probably expected this, or his aim goal was to get to the book, to connect to the book. Because as soon as a student is connected to the book, he didn't know where else to go. But having room in the classroom for the unexpected, so having kids to go further in their thoughts, to make other connections, and maybe unexpected connections, is missing. I don't know, at this age, I know that kids, they respond to what we want them to, because they have been to school for a long time.
How did you determine that he wanted them to connect with the book? Because that's a pretty big claim that you just put on the table.
My interpretation of the scene, because I don't know, he could have gone further, as he said. Like, how do you connect? What words from the book do you connect to the scene? What else do you connect to apart from the scene?
But I'm gonna come in with you as my friend here. You're also framing it in a certain way. You're saying, I'm assuming that he wanted them to make a connection with that book and that scene. And therefore, then they did that. They gave him the right answer. But how did I determine that's what he wanted them to understand? Did anybody have a thought, any along these lines?
Well, I don't know. My reading of the whole thing is, I think the teacher wanted the students to make this connection as well, but maybe if he wanted his students to go deeper in this segregation and the whole thing, maybe should have chosen a picture that wouldn't directly relate to the book. So a
Say a little
picture
bit more
that
about
would
that.
open their minds to other possibilities besides the trial, besides the book. And then later on, with their connections, get to the point of, so how can we relate or how can we make the connection from the picture, the situation, blah, to the book. So maybe the questions, well, from my point of view, the questions are right, the students thinking went to the right direction. Maybe the picture he chose didn't give the students much room for interpretation. They made the straight connection and done.
Try to go to.
Julia, it looks like you want to kind of build on from there.
Yeah.
This is what we have to do as teachers, as thinkers. And this is where we're not trying to challenge each other to be mean to each other. This is where we're pushing ourselves though beyond the land of thought. Nice. To really kind of think, what else are we not seeing that we could consider? You want to build on to that.
No, I agree with you. That's something that we said here. Maybe using other images that relate to segregation and then bridge from there. But since he was there and the students are reading the book, well, they recognize this as the scene from the court scene. So now, how does this image here, which is it's a frame from the movie, how does it connect to what you have pictured during the reading?
That could be another possibility there. You know, as you pictured the reading, or Harper Lee was the name of the author.
Yes.
And then how does the filmmaker's conception,
yes.
if I'm wanting them to understand about filmmakers' choices and authors' choices around setting, maybe. If I want them to understand the scene, maybe.
Yeah.
If I want them to understand segregation. Do you see what I'm trying to draw your attention to, everybody here, even in this talk here? It could be any and all of those things, but if he wanted them to understand this, or wanted to get them in the headspace of like understanding issues of segregation, and all they're doing is just seeing this scene, then there's a disconnect, perhaps. But that is largely dependent on what do we want them to understand. Do I want them to understand tears, or do I want them to understand healthy habits we make, our responsibility to our body? Do we want them to understand Braille, or do we want them to understand how is our community inclusive? You've heard some of these kinds of things. Do we want them to understand Jackson Pollock, or do we want them to understand how do artists represent and convey stories? I'm not doing gotcha with all that. I'm raising up our provocations because this is where, like, when I make their thinking visible, what am I making their thinking visible around or for or through? And it could be any and all of those things. Sometimes it's a yes and. But this is the place where, you know, a teacher here, he was like, wow, I wanted them to see something bigger about segregation or something like that. And all they said was, I wonder if it's the book. I wonder if it's the book. They weren't wondering about issues of segregation or injustice or something like that. In this case, another read or another thought?
Never can connect that because it's not a mistake. But my very first years of teaching literature, I used to Kill Mockingbird. And I remember it was my very first day. I had just graduated. And I didn't really set the tone or the context. What is it all about? And I got similar answers, and now I can connect somehow because my intentions in my head, they were clear. And I assumed that when we have our guiding questions for our reading, they will see segregation, they will see all the topics around it. But then again, I shouldn't assume that they are seeing that as well. And then whenever you're making a question, you connect, it's about this book, it's about this book. But then again, connect to what Camila said. What about having them connecting this whole situation to real world problems, to their own context first, and then maybe when they feel, and then when you're creating these opportunities, then it's actually much richer. But then again, as Antonio was saying, it's not wrong, the questions, because it does relate to the book. But then again, to what extent do we want their thinking to extend towards applying that knowledge and so on?
Yeah, some of you have some real puzzles. How do I get my kids to go deeper? You know, how do I get them to extend more? This is a good, healthy place for us to think, well, what more is there to extend on it's Gregory Peck, the actor, as Atticus Finch in the courtroom scene of To Kill a Mockingbird. Now extend that. It's, you know, there's nowhere to go. That's it. But if I know, it's not just, let's say, like I was thinking about your classroom there, the, you know, is it transport? Maybe. Is it, what could we do? Is it possibilities? Is it, what can we do for tools, or what can we do with tools? What can tools do for us? As you're kind of developing your units, everyone, I think this is going to be maybe some of the puzzle piece to keep playing around with. Maybe they're not extending their thinking because maybe it's just like too finite, and I got to go back to what's the bigger thing. I don't know. That's one thing though that would be healthy for this group of learners to start thinking about. Is it understanding this, or is this a vehicle for understanding what? And then the use of routines can play out differently there. But that might not be the whole problem space, and I don't want to be Debbie Downer with all these problems today, but we've got to kind of look into these things. Is it, what am I really trying to get them to understand? And so therefore, I want the thinking routine to play towards that goal. Somebody else in another group, and I want to just put a few other comments here and have it come to a landing place so that we can have a little more tea. Somebody else said that maybe they had read too much of the book already. Maybe the image was just fine. Like the possibility that the image was too one-to-one, that's a possibility. Somebody else in another group that I've worked with before said, maybe the image was just fine. Maybe they just read too far in the book. So therefore, there was no place for it to go. But had that image been used before they even started reading the book, might see, think, wonder have played out nicely there. So then it wasn't the opportunity of the image, maybe it was the timing. Oh, this is getting even more complex. Somebody else has said that maybe the image was just fine, where they were in the book was just fine. Maybe the routine of see, think, wonder wasn't enough. Maybe that wasn't the right routine. And I said, well, say a little bit more. And they said, well, what if the teacher had done step inside? Well, speak to me a little bit more about that. Well, okay, I could play out if I were the teacher. Okay, we all know Atticus Finch, the main character. And we all know the courtroom scene. But we don't know this guy back here. This is the guy that the author didn't write about. We don't know about this woman here. She's the unknown character. Step inside her point of view. What might she perceive? What might she know about or believe? What might she care about? Step inside this man here that looks like he's got a pin to his mouth. Maybe he's the assistant attorney, I don't know. But Harper Lee, that's the author, she didn't write about him. Step inside his point of view. What might he perceive? What might he know about or believe? You see, so somebody was saying, maybe the image is just fine. Maybe the length of the book was just fine, where they were in the book. Maybe it was a different kind of routine. But those maybes are highly dependent on the teachers. Can I use you guys' word? Intentionality, kind of plan, blueprint. It can be any and all of those things. And do you see, when you're an individual teacher kind of lost in that, it's kind of hard to see it any other way than how I see it. But when I've got other peers that I can kind of play it out with, other people can help different reads, and then I can say, no, I understand what you're saying there, Julia, but it's actually more like what Carol just. You see, this is why teachers will start honing in when you feel safe enough to share with one another the raw stuff, not just the polished pieces. I saw some hands that want to say something. Mice, why don't you give us a word, and then I'm going to come to a close.
When you came up with this routine, it extended a lot of my thinking, all my practices, the experience with that display. Because I think it's not so much about the right or wrong routines, because the class, it is what it is. So we're playing something and everything might go wrong, or the way we're playing, we never know how it's going to be.
And from the experience I had this week, I thought a lot about how important it is to think about the good questions before, because in my practice, I was expecting two questions, and then it was inviting, because we had a chance to debrief and discuss like these questions and think about like what else, like what are the other questions we could come with, sticking to this routine. So maybe we could do this like, oh, now we're doing Thinking and Wonder, but next time we're going to do it with the same teacher, because I think it still has changed for thinking and reflection. Does okay, so hard, but does it happen only in the book? Do you have another like thinking?
Yeah.
Does it happen like at that time? Does it happen today?
Yeah.
So I think.
Well, and there's also more to one element of your comment. Your comment has lots of lines for us to consider, but one of the things there, the notion of anticipating what I imagine the kids might say. I invited that a few times in some of the reflection groups, or in the learning labs. Okay, if the kids are going to say what excites us, I think Carol, we did that with the kids. Their interest is around animals. She's thinking about this issue of like human rights and responsibilities, and so what excites you about animals? What worries you about animals? What might I imagine kids saying? What excites you about humans being responsible for the protection of animals? What it worries you about humans being responsible for the protection of animals? You see, what might kids say? I might get different responses there. If that little anticipation isn't about I want to get down what I anticipate and then try to get the kids to match it. But if I don't have at least if I haven't played that out a bit, I may be thinking, oh, I want them to think about segregation or injustice, and they're only giving me responses of, it's To Kill a Mockingbird, okay? And so I have seen this play out over and over again in lots of classrooms. Take out To Kill a Mockingbird and put in, I do a lot of work in Australia, a picture of, what do you see? We see a white curved building that's pointy with a bridge in the background and water. We're in Australia now, okay? You got this? We see a white building, we see a curved building, we see a pointy building, we see water, we see a bridge in the background. We see an Australian flag. Okay. What do you think's going on there? We think it's the Sydney Opera House. What makes you say that? Because it's the Sydney Opera House. So what does that make you wonder? Wonder if it's the Sydney Opera House, right? Again, it's the To Kill a, I call it the To Kill a Mockingbird syndrome. It's out there. And if you haven't been classroom 1 yourself yet, then I'd like to know which water you're drinking, because I think a lot of us have had that. Let me just cap this off here. You're not alone, but these kinds of dwelling in possibilities, that's what I want for our learning group here today. We'll push further after the break, but let me unpack classroom 1 just a little bit. And this is where we'll go to morning tea. I've seen this syndrome. I've seen classroom 1s playing out in lots of places over time. Here's the best way I can describe it. It's not very eloquent, but this is just a descriptor of kind of how I'm making sense of it. It's almost like classroom 1 has this content or this goal. I've got this objective, okay? Then I launch into that content, I launch into that material. Then I'm going to engage students with a thinking routine. And then I'm going to check to see, oh, the kids really got that. It is the Sydney Opera House. Or, oh, I wanted them to see something else. They didn't get it. It's almost like that's the parameter. I've got my content goal, my target. I launch into the content. I use a thinking routine, and then I'm either really pleased or dismayed. In many ways, it's like the thinking routine is being used to illustrate the content, like a visual aid. Guys, we're going to be studying about water bottles. This is a water bottle. I should check my tone on that. I don't want to be very glib or too facetious on visual aids. But in some way, the routine isn't about necessarily making kids think invisible. The routine is being used like a visual aid. It's like the routine is being used to decorate the lesson plan, to jazz up the lesson, to make the lesson a little more exciting or a little more unconventional. In my mind, in these classroom ones, it's almost like, and forgive me if this isn't a holiday you celebrate, but I think the image will be fine. Okay, so like the Christmas tree. I almost think it's like the content is this Christmas tree, and then I'm using these thinking routines as ornaments. See, think, wonder. Oh, I can do a connect, extend, challenge. Oh, I can do a 3, 2, 1 bridge. And so I'm using the routines for their decorative feature. And then somehow it either looks beautiful or it turns out to be a little bit of a mess. Okay, classroom ones, we've been there, we've been there. And we will continue to be there. Anytime you try a first one, you might have a classroom one experience. When we come back from the break, we'll step inside a classroom 2 experience. And we'll run that as a simulation, if you will. So not to pit classroom 1 up against classroom 2. We know there's some limitations with this one. Classroom 2, hopefully there'll be a nice flow to it. But the whole idea is teachers as learners. This is the moment where stepping out of the experiences and using each other's collaboration, that's where it pushes us from. Did you like my morning voice this morning? Oh gosh, I had 3 packs of cigarettes before I came to school. I usually do 4. Wow, we overshot, but we started late in my regard. So it was 10:50. Let's come back at 11:20. Take your half hour. We'll go 11:20 to 1 o'clock for that middle section. So come back at 11:20. Take 30 minutes. I think there's some refreshments out there. To be continued. Go have some snacks. I didn't have 4 packs of cigarettes. I'm just fighting a little bit of a cold. Did you get some coffee? Did you get some water? Did you get some tea? You know, they say you are what you eat. And look what I'm eating.
So you are.
Cheese buns. That's right. Yeah. For those of you, I mean, everybody knows the cheese bun story. Most everybody knows the cheese bun story. But you know, I had to sign up for Philosophy so that I could register for that bike spinning class. And so when I'm on the road in other places, sometimes I get an email, just the advertisement, and it says, "Hola, cheese." So I keep getting these notes in Portuguese, and they keep calling me Cheese, because my name is Cheese. That was, anyway. So, friends, this morning, the trajectory we've been on is, again, reflecting on how is this week really connecting, extended your thinking. A lot of people bringing up ideas that, you know, collaboration with one another so we can push each other to raise questions. And part of it's the framing that we bring to things, too. Sometimes I don't even know the frames that I'm bringing to something because I live it. I'm in this moment, and so therefore that's the way I'm seeing it. And so that's not an evil thing. That's not anything wrong with me. It's just I see things a certain way, but sometimes another person, Razi or Irina or Carol, can maybe say, well, have you ever thought about this? Or what if it were this? And I thought, gosh, that's a brilliant question. I never even thought to ask it that way, because they might be framing something in another way. And so that's the power of connecting with one another, not so that you can bring artifacts just to have show and tell with each other, or but really when we bring our artifacts to the table to look at and learn from, there's always stuff for ourselves to think about. So that's the trajectory we've been on. Classrooms using thinking routines all the time. I use thinking routines, but they don't always play out the same way. This classroom one that we were just in, again, let me be very, very clear to acknowledge, I'm not trying to make classroom one the bad guy in this story, and we're gonna now go into the good guy. That's not helpful, actually. But it is trying to understand, okay, there was some promise in classroom one, there was right intention, there was a lot of things that are promising, but there were some rough edges there. Okay, the depth, or the kids just giving him the response that he wasn't quite expecting, and so what could that be? Was it his questioning? Was it the timing? Was it the routine? Was it the stimulus? And the answer could be, yeah, maybe, yeah, maybe, yeah, maybe. So in the classroom one scenarios though, or like that To Kill a Mockingbird syndrome, the Sydney Opera House syndrome, you know, the teacher has this goal, they launch into the topic, they start using routines, and the routines are playing this decorative feature, really decorating. And so if we weren't going to do it in that kind of way, if I weren't going to just position thinking routines as decorations, not that anyone ever intends that, but maybe in early days it feels that. Okay. So let's step into classroom two for a little while and play out how the routines go. And rather than just telling you about classroom two, I'm going to just invite you to be in classroom two. I'll be your teacher in this moment. And we will go through a little arc here through this experience. Then we'll step out of the experience and consider, well, where were there some distinctions? How are routines playing out in this scenario that maybe could add value to the work you're doing with your kids? So for now, just be a learner, and then we will we'll debrief the experience after we go on the arc. So classroom two, we'll step inside and we'll bring the simulation. And I'm going to pretend like you're my learners. I'm your teacher. And we've got this quote, this provocation. A lot of you organize your teaching around provocations. And so I came across this quote. Actually, this quote has been around for some time. Do you know this quote? This above all, to thine own self be true. Have you ever heard that quote before? To thine own self be true. It's from Shakespeare. Maybe it's in Hamlet or something like that. Is it Hamlet? Yeah, maybe. You said it with such authority there. Why not? Because it's in a movie. Because it's in a movie. There you go. I like how you made the connection. So being true to yourself, though, have you ever heard somebody say, you know, you really just need to be true to yourself? Have you ever heard that phrase before? Yeah, okay, being true to yourself. So, I've been at this teaching thing for a while, guys, and so I know that I used to think kids came into me blank, but I know that kids aren't blank in any way, shape, or form. We've already got lots of ideas about whatever topic we're going to set. So let's just say, here's our topic, being true to yourself. It's going to be useful for me and for us to go ahead and take stock. What are you already bringing into this? So just on a piece of paper, if you can, I would like you just to, just generate a little list of ideas that already come to your head when you think about our topic, being true to yourself. I'm going to put a list of questions. You don't have to answer all these questions. Sometimes I see you, oh, there's a question, I have to answer it. No, I'm going to give you the flavor of the questions, and you just start generating a list of ideas that come to mind. When you think about being true to yourself, what comes to mind? What does that mean? What does it mean to be true to yourself? What does it involve? How does it happen? Why does being true to yourself really matter? Why do people say that you need to be true to yourself? Don't write sentence after sentence after sentence. Just get yourself a nice bullet point list. Here are the things that come to my mind when I think being true to yourself. This is what it is. This is how it happens. This is why it matters. I'll be quiet while you generate a list. If you've got 2 or 3 ideas at least, I think you're pretty good. We're just trying to surface some prior knowledge. That's always helpful for me as your teacher, just to know what you're already bringing in. So that I can kind of figure out where we might need to go based on what our starting line is. Being true to yourself. This above all else. To thine own self be true, said Shakespeare. Be true to yourself. You must already have some ideas about that. With one person next to you, if you're in a table group of 4, just pair up. If you're a table group of 3, then all 3 of you. But pair up, share it with your partner. You don't have to agree or disagree with each other, but just introduce her or him to the ideas that you're already bringing to this topic. Here are some of the things that are on my mind. You don't have to do agree or disagree. Just start getting a sense between the 2 of you what kinds of ideas are already on your mind. I'll come back in about 90 seconds or so after you've shared the list.
Well, what I do is my mom is thinking about the concept of accepting my limits and about acknowledging my okay. And you?
I was thinking about also knowing my own version of my family. This would also bring text or values.
We need to be more so that we can work on that. And or and question why? Why is I connect to figure out what our legacy is. So when I know that I'm very concerned about my own values, the culture that I work in, something like that.
When what my being true to myself, being true to myself, had a clear vision of myself. I was thinking about having so I have to I believe that anything I just want to raise something.
Okay. Sorry, everyone, sorry. Can I just come in for a moment? I'm just noticing something that, just as I suspected, you're not coming in this topic blank. Everybody's already got some ideas and conceptions around this. And I'm overhearing some of your great conversations. I'm just thinking, I'm worried if those conversations just happen and then leave. So maybe registering this, documenting in some ways would be useful. So now that you and your partners are talking, maybe you still have more to talk about. I am going to have you do this. I'll go off mic here and give you another 5 minutes or so. We'll see how it goes. I'd like you to do some getting that thinking down. I think that's going to be important for us to register that, to document it. So I'd like you and your partner, I'll come around with an A3 size, not for each of you, but I'll give your partnership or your trio an A3. I'd like you to take your ideas from your initial list and go ahead and sort those out for me. So don't just document by listing, but like once you've talked, when Irina and Catherine have talked for a bit, they'll take that as lists and sort them out. The things that they think are really, really central to being true to yourself, they're going to put them in their map very, very centrally. The things that they think, yeah, that's important, but it's a little further out, then they're going to place it a little further out. Things that they think are overarching, they might even put it on there, they'll register it that way. That's very overarching, they'll document it in that way. If it's underpinning, they'll underpin it. So in other words, don't just circle in starburst. That's not going to be so helpful to make your thinking visible here. But document your thinking. Where you place it, you're giving meaning to it. We think this is rather central, this is more tangential. So I'll come around with the A3. So continue to share what's on your list if you don't know what's on your list. And then you can do some sorting when you get that A3 there. Does that make sense? Are there any questions around that? Okay, then have at it, and I'll bring that A3 real fast.
And the next one was that they see myself better is better to myself and my brother. Okay, we have to decide what our priorities.
So let's write it in the middle, right?
I introduce myself. I always said, what is going to be central? So I would say values are important. Okay, so they are connected, right? Okay, know your strengths, right? Or potential. Does this depend on my value?
Ideas that you think are rather simple, place them there. If you think that's tangential or what you decide, place them there. Placement matters. It helps me understand how you see things.
Be aware of my Does that depend on my limits? So look for a meeting. And does
So-
it depend
so
on my
friends-
potential?
Sorry. Hi, everybody. I see people are starting to sort their lists here. That's helpful for me. In the past, I used to have my former students, they would say, okay, here's our topic, here's all the things I know, and it was like a sunshine with equidistant sunbeams. And then I was like, okay, that's the stuff you're already knowing, but it didn't help me know how you see those stuff in relationship. So the sorting idea, I thought, wow, the things that you think, yeah, now that's really important, that's very central, you're actually placing it on your map there, kind of like some of those bullet points are closer in. And the other things you think, yeah, that's part of it too, but maybe in relation, it's a little further out. The placement is helping me and helping us to start to see not only what's the stuff, but how it's related. I will say this, and then I'm going to be quiet for a few more moments. I've seen some people start to say, yeah, but that's sort of related to that. And That sort of connects with that, but that has to happen before that. I've seen people naturally put those arrows on. That seems like what thinking people do. So when you and your partner sort, if that's related to that, go ahead and document, register that. I think that's going to be important. The arrows don't always say a lot, though, so if you could just elaborate on those arrows, just give us a few words. What is that arrow meaning? I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to set my stopwatch for about. I'll check in with you in about 4 minutes from now. Do the best you can to get your map sorted and any connections and elaborations. Go ahead and get those down.
Well, it was like we both had questions and reflections. So I was thinking, right? Yeah, I think maybe it is connected kind of to reflection and to questioning and to looking at okay, yeah. What are other things that it would here besides? So I would put here, right? Development and growth. So knowing my weaknesses and my limits to develop and grow. And then from questioning and looking for meanings, doing meaningful things, right? Yes. Making a difference. No more my flags are, so maybe stick to my beliefs.
Gracie, I don't know if this microphone's on. Can you get it a little bit louder? Okay, so could you just stop where you are? Let's That's where you should. Let's get that last thing done then. Can people just show their maps and just kind of like, you know, I mean, you're not going to be able to read it from table to table, but just hold them up there. Just so other people can see, just kind of showcase it around. I mean, you can't even get into the thick of it from where you are, but you already see the variance. Now I want to talk teacher to teacher. Go ahead and put these down. I want to talk teacher to teacher and then go back into the experience. I had a decision to make. Do I go ahead and make out a worksheet with the circle and the lines and then have kids fill in? And, you know, I could have done that if that might manage something in another way. In this case, I decided, no, actually generating our ideas was important individually, but the sorting and where they place it in the assortment, some of you have got things close in, some of you have got things further out. That's making some thinking visible, not only for yourselves, but for me, and also for our community as we take a look at our initial thoughts about, let's say, our topic. Looking for connections and elaborating on those connections, that just seems like a natural thinking step to do. This is much different than, let's say, circle and sunbeam with everything equidistant from each other. You know what I mean when I say circle and sunbeam? Or satellite with nodes on it. Yeah, there's a time and place for that, but, you know, getting my kids, because somebody said it's just like a mind map. In many ways it is. You're mapping what's going on in your mind, individually, but then collectively as well. That was a little teacher to teacher talk. Allow me to step back into the simulation. You're my students, I'm the teacher. As I said, you have a lot going on in your mind around being true to yourself, what that involves, why it's important, why that matters. Can I tell you something that would make my teacher heart really, really sad? We're going to go on this exploration, this unit of inquiry for, let's say, the next 3 weeks or 2 weeks, if it were in a real classroom. If the map that you would produce for me 2 weeks from now is the same thing that you just made right now, that made me really sad. Because I would think, then what were all these lessons over these 2 weeks for? So in the past, I had kids do these maps and they think of it as their finish line. But I'd like to invite you to think, oh, this map now isn't our finish line. This map is our starting line. If this is what you're already bringing, as we read things, as we do investigations, as we encounter things, my invite, you're going to hear me do this with you a lot, is always, what more can you add to this map? How can you grow your thinking? What more? You're already bringing in so much, but what more can you uncover? What more can you add? What more can you connect with as a result of all these experiences we're going to have? Don't make my teacher heart sad. If 2 weeks from now it's the same map, then might as well take 2 weeks holiday. Okay? So this is our challenge, guys. We're going to add more to our maps. So having said that, let's carry on with the simulation. Maybe it's the next day. Guys, you know, we have this unit of inquiry about being true to ourselves and things. You know, I was listening to the radio the other day. I was listening to this program, and a gentleman was talking about some experiences. He's a father, and he was talking about his daughter. And it was for a particular program. And as I was listening to it, I thought, wow, I think in his talk about his experience with his daughter, I think there's an element of being true to yourself that's in there somehow, some way. And I thought, I want my kids, I want my students to kind of listen in on this essay and think, what more to being true to yourself does this man's story maybe reveal for us or provoke for us? So this comes from a series, in the United States, we have a series called This I Believe. I shared one of those essays with you when we did Color Symbol Image back in February. Remember the woman, Phyllis Allen, This I Believe, leave the identity issues to other folks, right? She's this African-American woman that said, I don't believe that I'm supposed to be this or this or this or this. I'm just going to be me. Right? Remember that? Yeah. Okay, for those of you who are here, so the program really invites the public to submit their statement of belief. not their religious belief, not like a proselytizing belief, but sort of your philosophy, your personal philosophy. What drives you? What's your ethos? So this man, Greg Rogers, he has also written an essay. And on a Friday a few years ago, it's a number of years ago now, they played his essay on the radio. His essay was, "This I believe, I am capable of more than I think I am." As you listen to his essay, I want you just to kind of, he didn't write it for our purposes, he wrote it for the radio. But as you listen to his essay, the words should come over the speaker, the words will come on the screen. Just ask yourself, where is there something in Greg's story that connects with something you already mapped about being true to yourself? But where is there something that extends your map in some way? Maybe sheds a new light on something, gives you something more to add to your map. You're either going to get some light on some familiar things, or you're going to get some lights shined on some new stuff. So let's just challenge ourselves for that space. Teacher to teacher, I want to share with you. I don't know if I would use this particular essay with the age of kids you have. I might with high school kids, but with your age, I'm not thinking this would be appropriate for your age level. This father and his wife were expecting, and they found out some news from their obstetrician that their baby was going to be born with Down syndrome. And that wasn't news that they were expecting. And that was really hard for them. And you can see right there from the beginning of his essay, and you'll hear it. It was tough. He really had a hard time knowing that his daughter was going to be born with Down syndrome. So the beginning of the essay is pretty raw. It's pretty emotional. I don't want anybody to be blindsided by that. He's just sharing his experience. If you can stick through that emotion long enough, you'll know there was a beautiful resolve for him the day his daughter arrived. And he got to hold her for the first time. So have a listen and ask yourself, what does that add to our idea about being true to yourself? So let's have a listen.
Greg Rogers came to his belief only after his daughter was born. Before that, his beliefs were different and based, he said, on fear. His transformative journey toward his new belief began in the doctor's office during the pregnancy, when he and his wife first received the news. Here's Greg Rogers with his essay for This I Believe. It is trisomy 21. It is Down syndrome. Beyond those words, I heard nothing sitting in the obstetrician's office. The doctor was talking about my unborn daughter and the results of an amniocentesis. I know there were words after that statement, but I don't remember them. I do remember returning home with my wife and crying on the sofa. I distinctly remember saying, I don't want this. I didn't want this situation. I didn't want this responsibility. I didn't want to become one of those parents, the parents of a child with a disability. People told me, if anyone can handle it, you can. Easy for you to say, I thought. God never gives you more than you can handle, they reassured me. Really? And why do people have nervous breakdowns? We'll help however we can, they said. Fine, I thought. You have the kid with the developmental delay, and I'll help you out. For months, I was terrified. My wife Lucy and I now refer to the period of time leading up to my daughter's birth as the pit. We barely spoke to each other because we didn't know what to say. We simply suffered through each day, together, but feeling terribly alone. And then Genevieve was born. She spent her first 8 days in the neonatal intensive care unit at a regional medical center. On each of those 8 days, I made the 150-mile round trip to see her because she was my daughter. I sat in a surgical gown in intensive care, holding her in a tangle of tubes and wires, singing the same songs I had sung to other daughters. On the 9th day, she came home, and I began to realize that my feelings of fear and anxiety had changed in a way that no prenatal screening could ever have predicted. I now believe Genevieve is here for everyone. I believe Genevieve is taking over the world one heart at a time, beginning with mine. I believe that what was once our perceived damnation has now become our unexpected salvation. Genevieve recently turned 3 and is doing very well for herself. She runs and climbs on everything. and loves to wrestle with her 2 older sisters and her younger brother. She doesn't have a lot of spoken words yet, although her first full sentence turned out to be, "What's up with that?" She does have over 100 signs that allow her to ask for strawberries, pizza, or ice cream, or tell us when she wants to sleep or play on her computer. She goes to a regular preschool 3 days a week and seems to know more people around town than I do. I laugh every day because of Genevieve. On my right wrist, I wear a simple silver chain with 3 little beads on it. I used to say the 3 beads signified the 3rd chromosome that results in trisomy 21, Down syndrome. Now when I look at those beads, they simply remind me that I don't ever know as much as I think I do, but I'm always capable of more than I think I am. Greg Rogers, with his essay for This I Believe. Rogers said the decision not to terminate the pregnancy was really his wife's. He said, "She had more faith in my ability to handle this than I did, and she was right."
So that's a picture, of course, of Greg and Genevieve. Looks like a happy daughter and a happy father. So, he wrote it for this series, This I Believe. They have all sorts of essays. So he didn't write it for our purposes. He wrote it for that radio intrigue. But I think there's something about being true to yourself revealed somewhere within that. I'm curious about kind of your take on it. So why don't you talk back with the people that you were mapping with and ask yourselves, where was there something in Greg's essay that really connected with something that you've already mapped? It just really put a nice, beautiful spotlight right on something we were already thinking in terms of being true to yourself. And it's also good for us as thinking people to also say, where did this extend our thinking in some way? Where is there something in Greg's story that maybe gave us some new light? It gives us one more thing to add to our map. It pushes us just beyond the edge a little bit. So have some conversation. I'll go quiet for a bit so you can make that thinking possible.
Maybe the disconnect is not You know what made me say before when it calmed down, she did not say I can't do this because I don't want to. And I think it has to do with allowing your feelings to show. He knew he probably did do it because he already had 3 kids, but he did not want to do it. And It's like, but it's also the meaning. Do I want to do this? I want to find
Talvez eu vou fazer por questão de dar um that is
persisting.
I just love you to, with those connections and extensions, anything you can elaborate onto your map, grow those maps. This is where those maps are starting place. Yeah, one more thing on that. Either a familiar idea that you want to elaborate more, or a new idea that you want to add on. That's what I want for us as learners, growing.
Persisting, taking responsibility. Not be flexible. All this is connected.
So friends, can we talk as a whole group? I just have to call time for our PD management. I want to acknowledge this, like in the classroom, like many of you, all the learning labs this week, when do you let something go and when do you need to transition or pivot, that plays out in my teaching life just as yours, right? And sometimes you have to just make decisions other than, we need to kind of just push in right now. My hunch is there's more for you to be talking about with his story and adding to your map. But for our PD experiences here, right now, I think everybody's added at least one thing or has one more thing that you put on your map. And again, now I'm talking teacher to teacher, and then we'll get back in our simulation a bit. And that's just the thing. As kids, I want you to be able to add more as a result of this article we read, or that many of you showed YouTube videos. Okay, I don't want to just do that to entertain you, to decorate this lesson. But if we're going to watch this video, how does this add something to our initial ideas? Or how does it make us think about our initial ideas in another way, or give us further ideas? We'll debrief the full process in a moment. I could imagine if we were in the classroom, though, if this was time to come back to the carpet, like Camilla, you had kids coming to the carpet. Maybe you've been at your tables, come back to the carpet, okay, and your ticket is your map. And let's have a round. Where do people add to their maps? That could be a way to manage the facilitation of it. Just from where you are right now, though, and for the whole group, I would like to hear, where were, sorry, my English is not so good, clearly. I know a lot of British people who would tell me that. Where did people make some additions to their map? I found my word. Where did people make some additions to their map? Could you just share with us something that you added onto your map? without, you don't have to talk your whole map through, but just share with us one thing that you added to your map.
We're talking about things which we values, regardless of pressure or outside the environment. And then listening to this, because we believe that it can change according to other people, according to their experiences, and according to the people who are around you that may find in you or see in you something that you didn't see in yourself. And listening to that can give you the strength or something else they didn't have before. So your truth can change.
So it sounded like, okay, we already were talking about our core values and what holds us steady. But as inspired by what you heard here, there's also that dynamic quality. It could change based on what someone else might see in his wife. He didn't think he could do it. But she had more, what was that very last line? She had more faith in him than he did. We can do this. And so you're kind of bringing up that kind of the fluid aspect, that our ideas about ourselves can change. Being true to ourselves is fluid. Did I hear you right, or capture it a bit? How about someone else? What was an aspect that you added to your map, a connection or extension in some way?
We talked a lot about honesty and being honest with our feelings and who we are. And one thing that we were discussing is the fact that we need to accept fear as well, and not be afraid of the unknown, and embracing the unexpected.
It makes this really challenging, doesn't it? Being true to myself and being honest about my strengths is one thing, or things I feel confident in.
Yeah.
But can I also be honest of, I may not know this. I may not be good at this. And with that comes fear. And that's part of it as well. Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah.
How about someone else? What's one thing that you added to your map?
As we were talking, changing perspective and how we connected with and then you always try to say something to help, but you're not helping at all, because sometimes we are so afraid of something that you don't know how to help, and you don't know to. So we thought like help other people with the challenge, with empathy, and like trying to not to be afraid and not to position sometimes, just to breathe and like try to be transparent and ownership of our action. Okay.
Yeah.
And no, I don't know what to do. What can we do? Sometimes that's it.
Yeah. Well, early on in his story, the friend said, "Oh, if anybody can handle this, you can." And he was like, "Really? Well, then you do this, and I'll help you." God never gives you anything more than you can handle. Well, then why do people have nervous breakdowns? And he wasn't being facetious or jaded, but that was that very real. I'm afraid of this, and you're trying to help, and it's not so helpful. And so it sounds like you already had ideas around core values and truths. You guys had an addition. Danielle, will you share with us your addition?
Our addition was to allow yourself to uncomfortable situations and uncomfortable feelings, and you just deal with that instead of being close to avoid. It's kind of taking responsible risks.
So you're really connecting with our habits of mind.
Habits of mind, yeah.
But allowing myself to be comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And being open, I think I heard you say, rather than just closed. I may not even think that I'm closed until I'm faced with something that's forcing me to have to be open to something I didn't even know I was closed to. Did you have something like that?
Yeah, we actually wrote that because, as Antonio was saying here, at first we wrote to know who you are, but sometimes when you want to stick to that's who I am, you're being stubborn and you're not being open for learning and being flexible with the situation, because sometimes, of course, you learn when you're dealing with frustration, but you're so still, this is who I am, I will stick to my core values, and I will not compromise, but then compromise maybe your compromise for something good, for the benefit of everyone, but then again, you don't compromise because you're being stubborn and you think that you are right about that thing. So we were crossing here instead of saying that and know who you are. It's like knowing who you are and being open for learning and being flexible depending on the situation.
This notion of dynamic or flexibility, knowing who you are, knowing there's more to who you are than you do not know. There's a lot to this that makes this complex. So getting some thinking out there on the table and then having some experiences so you can add to it. So then you also have a reason to listen to one another. That's on my mind as a teacher. Partly too, it's like when somebody's like, oh, I want to say something that adds on to that, then it's no longer popcorning, but then it's kind of building like ice cream. Okay, so they just put that scoop on, and now you want to add another scoop onto that, another flavor into this mix. The benefit on my end too is when I see this girl pick up the baton, woman, student, any and all of those things. When this person picks up the baton of the conversation from that group, and that person picks up the baton, so then when the routines become just routine, it gives me a chance then to get quiet for a moment and just observe, just hear, so I can figure out, okay, well, let's push in on this more, either today or further on. And I know some of you are racing the clock in your classrooms right now. You're doing a lot, and part of it's just the newness of a first school year in this school getting started. So I can imagine some of that will just naturally dissipate as the year goes on and into next year. But I would like to encourage you, like the use of routines, not only for their benefit, but also for my benefit, so I can have some moments where I can even have some micro reflection in the moment. So I can start noticing, oh, they're all in this vein, but what about this? I've asked, how did his story connect with some ideas? How did his story maybe extend an idea? I could even see us getting into this. We were already in this space just naturally, but so being true to yourself, everybody says do it, yeah, but there's some complexities to that. So what makes this a challenge? What makes this complex? What makes it hard to be true to yourself? And many people say, because I don't always want to allow myself to face it. I don't even know when I'm being unwittingly closed, right? Blind spots in my own life are the hardest to see because they are blind, or I'm blind to them. So I can imagine getting us into a talk like that. I would like to, in our simulation, just a little bit more. I've got one more angle into this. I would like to listen to one more radio clip with you. This idea of being true to yourself and another story, another perspective. This one's not even as long as the first one. It's another radio clip. And as you listen, as you listen, just listen to this guy's story. Is there one more aspect that you can add to? Is there one more thing? If there's something inside there that you can get out, I'd love to do that as your teacher and for us as learners. This story actually isn't this idea. This comes from a group called StoryCorps. StoryCorps.org. You can look up all sorts of these things. I don't think I played anything from StoryCorps with you last time, did I? Anybody familiar with StoryCorps? No. Okay. So, well, StoryCorps, as an organization, they, I was talking with, I was talking with you about this earlier this week. That's right. I recall that now. Their premise is this: listening is an act of love. And they make an argument. Our societies have become so busy, and they're thinking about American society, but I think it's across the world. We become so busy with our lives that we don't hear one another's stories anymore. And then what is civilization if we don't hear our stories? How civilized are these very advanced nations? How advanced is an advanced place if we don't hear each other anymore? So they took one of those old silver Airstream trailers, those camper vans that sometimes you see in movies that you would pull in the back of your car and go out to the middle of the desert and go camping or whatever. They took one of those old caravans, they turned it into a sound studio, and they put it right in the middle of New York City's Grand Central Station. Grand Central Station being the main train station. very symbolic of hundreds of thousands of people passing each other each day and nobody seeing anybody. And they put this Airstream trailer right in the middle of Grand Central Station, and they invited the public to come in and share their story. Friend bring friend, colleague bring colleague, mother bring daughter, grandfather bring grandson, neighbor bring neighbor, friend bring friend. Interview one another, share your story. They make a professional recording for our nation's Library of Congress, and then they also get a professional recording as well. It's kind of a neat project, and they've been amassing, then they've taken the trailer and pulled it out to the rural communities and to various cities and so on and so forth. I'm going to share with you one vignette from one guy's story. His name is Julio Diaz. He stopped by StoryCorps. He's going to explain it, to share a little bit of an experience that happened to him. As you listen to his story, the words should come up and we should hear it again. Is there one more aspect of being true to yourself that maybe gets uncovered in this one? Can you find it? It's hidden in there somewhere, or some aspect. Just press yourselves. You're the kind of kids that can do that. Okay, so let's have a listen. I can deal with this.
It makes me think of Julio Diaz, a social worker in the Bronx. Every night after work, he would get off of the subway one stop early to eat at his favorite diner. And he came to StoryCorps to tell the story of a night he stepped off the train onto an empty platform, and the evening took an unexpected turn.
So I get off the train, I'm walking towards the stairs, and this young teenager pulls out a knife. He wants my money. So I just gave him my wallet, told him, here you go. He starts to leave, and as he's walking away, I'm like, hey, wait a minute, you forgot something. If you're gonna be robbing people for the rest of the night, you might as well take my coat to keep you warm. So, he's looking at me like, what's going on here, and he asks me, well, why are you doing this? And I'm like, well, I don't know, man, if you're willing to risk your freedom for a few dollars, then I guess you must really need the money. I mean, all I wanted to do was go get dinner, and if you really want to join me, hey, you're more than welcome. So I'm like, look, you can follow me if you want. I just felt maybe he really needs help. So, we go into the diner where I normally we sit down in the booth, and the manager comes by, the dishwashers come by, the waiters come by to say hi, So the kid was like, man, but you know everybody here. Do you own this place? I'm like, no, I just eat here a lot. He's like, but you're even nice to the dishwasher. I'm like, well, haven't you been taught you should be nice to everybody? So he's like, yeah, but I didn't think people actually behave that way. So I just asked him in the end, I'm like, what is it that you want out of life? He just had almost a sad face. Either he couldn't answer me or he didn't want to. The bill came, and I look at him and I'm like, look, I guess you're gonna have to pay for this bill because you have my money and I can't pay for this. So if you give me my wallet back, I'll gladly treat you. He didn't even think about it. He's like, yeah, okay, here you go. So I got my wallet back. And I gave him $20 for it. I figure maybe it'll help him, I don't know. And when I gave him the $20, I asked him to give me something in return, which was his knife. And he gave it to me. It's funny because when I told my mom about what happened, no mom wants to hear this, but with her, she was like, oh, you're the type of kid that always someone asked you for the time, you gave them your watch. And I figure, if you treat people right, you can only hope that they treat you right. It's as simple as it gets in this complicated world.
Why don't you spend just a few moments with that friend you've been mapping with? And we don't have to go full blown with this, but do have a little processing. Giving his perspective, what he just shared, anything more that connects with some things that we're about? Is there something new that you can add that extends or elaborates? Just talk, and I'll come back in a few moments.
Right? Well, I'm the one to have to map. You know what it makes me think of different perspectives. Divorce, is the other side. No, I think that's
Versions of the rap.
We have questions in our section. I think he also controls. Usually you respond with like because I control your ears
That's right. Yeah, Marina.
We have no space to write. Is there anything else? We are like, we're being really strict ourselves. So that is we're just like
Thank you for sharing. So, friends. Friends, we'll come together here because I know this is another management role where, what do we need to document? What needs to be shared in this moment? What do I need just my students to register or document in this moment? Because I know then I can take that, reflect on it, and set a direction for tomorrow or for the rest of the unit. So I want to just throw some highlights towards the processes here. We do need to step out of simulation pretty soon. In this case, I'm not going to have to you share the connections and extensions or the elaborations this time. Because I think you are getting an idea of, growing that map, growing that. Start with some initial ideas and then growing. It's hard to push for depth if I don't have some initial something up front to start working with. And then I also see teachers when they're initially getting some kids thinking visible, then all of a sudden, oh, they're not going as deep as I want them to. It's like, well, but take what they've given, and then how can we depth it? I just turned that into a weird verb. But how can we sophisticate? How can we make it more sophisticated? Goodness, I have to leave the country tonight and get back home so I can. Next thing you speak. Wouldn't it be nice if it was just that easy? Just be there a week and you could do it. But sometimes when depth is important, right? Depth has a lot to do with listening, so I can push in on questions. But I also think that depth question, based on the shallow and things that came up on Monday, those are very typical phenomena that you're experiencing. I'd be surprised if you didn't. But where could depth, is it maybe it's just not the right time to push for that depth? Therefore, today I'm laying some groundwork, like even the initial maps, that might not be as deep as they possibly could go, but that's enough because I've got my eye on this experience that's going to come up where we even push more depth and push more depth. At some point we would step out, and I have done this with other groups, but for our time's sake, I'll just hold up. I've asked people to step outside the experience and say, okay, now look at your maps where it's grown over time. In a classroom, it might be over the past 3 weeks, it could be over the past week, it could be over the past hour. Hours are pretty short. I often think about how do I take an hour and make it a week, and with several installations. But I can imagine stepping back and saying, look at where your thinking was and where it is now. This is a great time to do, I used to think now. We used to think being true to yourself is this. Now we're thinking, or now we think. I know some of you have made some adaptations. If I used to think, now I know. Know is a very absolute thing. Now I know this. I can imagine there are times and places where you'd want kids to pinpoint those absolute things. Now we're thinking. That also keeps it still up for some dynamicism. So I just want to point out that language there. I'm not saying I used to think, now I know is incorrect. I think that that's an opportunity. I think that's a good one. I used to think, and now we're thinking. I can imagine doing that throughout the unit so that we can keep growing and extending. Here's a group that I worked with in the past. Here's some of the documentation. We used to think that thinking was to stay honest and true and be resilient. So you guys said that, didn't you? Now we're thinking that self is determined by an internal mechanism, but it's also defined by environment, people, experiences. Something like that throws hints to what you were saying right there. I used to think, this is the bottom left one, I used to think it was a set of rules and ideas set for life. Now I think this set of rules can change. We used to think narrowly about ourselves, have faith in our own judgment. Now we think more broadly about helping others, treating others how we would like to be treated. So it's that kind of documentation that I can also imagine as being artifacts to bring to a study group. So what does it seem like the kids really are taking away as we look at their used to thinks, now they thinks, or now they knows? I can see that as documentation, not just for launching their inquiry, but as a result of their inquiry. Because I know you've got lots of documentation in space, and the story of learning in your classrooms is very rich. It needs to be communicated. I think that self was something that you developed. It became more rigid over time. Now we think self is more a fluid construct that changes as we journey through life. This was the classroom 2 scenario. Okay, we were exploring classroom 1 before, and it gave us a point of reflection. Well, classroom 2, the whole experience we just had, there's some questions for us to raise here too. Again, it was a simulation we ran through, but in the spirit of learning labs, right? What's going on here? What was your read of this situation or this whole simulation? What seemed promising? I mean, certainly routines were used in this classroom, just like the first classroom. But what were you noticing here? So we're no longer talking about the topic to my own self be true. Stepping outside that. let's think about that process. As you went through classroom 2, what were you noticing about the inlay of routines? What were you noticing about sort of just the whole simulation in general? Where were there some lessons for us to start pointing out to us as concept school teachers? Some positive. So I'll be quiet so you can do a little processing. What came up for you?
It seems like routine is implemented, the students are able to go the level of thinking that the students are bringing. The first moments, actually, they were not only, actually, they developed those sentences at the beginning already, and then in the end, they could develop more and added more, recover complexity.
What do you mean by routine?
That it's not something for, it's not like just here trying to find the right answer. The answer that teachers
Not so predictable about everything like in the classroom that he showed the answer that the kids were the oh I think we are it's a scene of the film the book and the students were clearly just wanting to please the teacher with an answer that oh they might like to their soul games over I say what he wants and that's it and but maybe the teacher was looking for connections for evidence of the process and when we will hear this kind of stories, I think it activates some knowledge that maybe we didn't touch, we don't have the opportunity to wider point of view and make more connections because our net was much bigger than at the beginning. And it's not that it was wrong, but we could see that a lot more young we were thinking. Well, I think the difference is the way the teacher built up the answer. It wasn't just answer the question and then fine. It was answer the question and build on it. Answer that question, think about that, and then sit from another point of view and connect to it. So it was kind of, it wasn't just, okay, answer it. Great, you said something, that is very good. That's not what I understand. It was just, well, let's say from this point of view, what would you say was that way, and why do you say that? So it was kind of, building up, just like you said, the icebreaker. So we were taking well, the name of that, I guess, you can call it thinking, you can call it building, you can call it reflecting, right? But that is something that is not a language.
So I'm hoping, that the space that we're in, I mean, it's a big ask for you to put in a big full blood, sweat, and tears into the past 5 school days, as well as then come organize your life outside of here so that you could be in here today. And so I hope that some of the reflections that we're having here is not just looking back, but kind of contextualizing some experiences people have been having, as well as giving some inroads or for further action, ways forward. This classroom 2 scenario, I know you have some reflections around that. I want to share with you some thoughts around this classroom 2 of sorts. And just maybe where I'm starting to see a little distinctions between the classroom 1s, classrooms 2s. And again, it's not we were wrong before and now we're right. It's just, maybe it's just the evolution of things too. And sometimes my classroom feels classroom 2-ish, and then other times, for whatever reason, it goes back to a classroom 1-ish. Maybe when I'm trying something for a first time, So just pointing out some of the features, I think, is a very useful thing for us to do. In classroom 2, like classroom 1, the teacher had a structural goal. Classroom 2 as well, we've got this topic, to oneself be true. We've got this topic, human rights. We've got this topic, healthy living, use of tools, whatever. To kill the monkey. Just like classroom 1, we've got this instructional goal. Classroom 1, and a lot of teachers do, they launch right into the topic. Classroom 2, we didn't launch right into the topic directly as maybe in other scenarios. But what the first move was, let's surface the students' initial ideas via a thinking routine. I used generate, sort, connect, elaborate this time. Others of you have been using think, puzzle, explore. Traditionally, in other places, people have done, what do you know? What do you want to find out? What do you know? What do you want to find out about? Might not be the exact same flavor. That might tell me what you're interested in. That might not tell me exactly what conceptions or misconceptions you have. It's a fine line. It could, but its flavor seems like it's just more about what you're interested in, as opposed to kind of what you're already bringing, understanding, conceiving. So whatever mechanism you use, it is this idea, I've got this goal, or we've got this goal, okay? Let me get your thinking into my head first, or into our heads first. And then the teacher provides some content, then we have that first simulation, I should say, of that radio clip, but it could be a YouTube clip, it could be 2 weeks of lessons, 2 weeks of lessons, probably not that, 2 days of lessons. But we're going to get into some content. But then the next move was, now let's hook back to our original thinking via routine, and then press for further elaboration. See, we had that initial map there. Then we did some content. Now let's go back. Where were our ideas before? Okay, what have we hooked onto? What were we thinking before that came to light now? What new things have we added on? Right, so there was a hook back maneuver in this classroom 2. Then we did some more content, right? Listen to another radio clip. We could read another chapter in our book. We could, could be a variety of things. But then there's another hook back. Okay, now that we've been here, we've done this lesson. Now, where are we in our thinking? So there's always that sort of iterative. We're kind of getting into the space and focusing and trying to get as much depth as we can. If I can't get this one as deep as possible, I know there's going to be some other places along the way, and there's always these circle backs. I'm wondering if that might help on the deep front for some folks, so that it's deep depth over time. Eventually, and what we did here in a classroom too, I didn't do a full blown of this with you, given our time, but eventually step outside the experience and say, okay, so what have we learned here? Where were we? Where are we now? Maybe that's a bridge maneuver on a 3-2-1 bridge-ish thing. Where's our thinking grown? What new things do we now know? What new ideas do we have? I used to think, now I think. It's very, very subtle. To the outside eye, classroom 1's list and classroom's 2 list don't seem all that different. But yet the experience is the subtle but that very powerful shift in terms of the roles of students, the role of the teacher, the role of the opportunities, the interaction, the language, the time. I'm going down all those other cultural forces. I just want to do routines. Well, wait a minute, but I can't do routines without thinking about all those other cultural forces. I'm giving you this vision in some ways, so because I think many of you are so close to this, if you're not already having versions of this already. You were sharing questions that kids asked that you were like kind of blown away with. You know, that kid was circling back already to conversations you had. So this is in the works for this school. So this is where I think, you know, in your July reading, your August work, your September work, before I come back around in October, you can press yourself in on what would it mean to kind of grow more classroom 2-ish. In classroom 1, you know, it was the thinking routine was like a decoration. The thinking routine was like a visual aid. In classroom 2, I don't have a good way of saying it, but it's like the thinking routine is being used to advance, to develop, to deepen the content goal. Almost like connective tissue, if you will. We're illuminating, we're connecting from lesson to lesson to lesson. Those aren't just episodes, it's moving along an arc, if you will. What would that mean with the 2-year-olds? I don't know. What would that mean if I'm not a class teacher and I'm seeing all the classes, let's say in the art studio? But there will be versions of that in all of our scenarios. You know, where the first one I was kind of using that image of a Christmas tree. My content is like the tree and the routines are an ornament. I've got this, in this scenario, it's almost like my content is this tree and maybe the routines are being strung through lights. And once you get those lights placed, in different parts of that tree sort of come to light. So if you celebrate that holiday and that's something you have in your house, then you know when you shut the lights off, then different things come to light as different things twinkle. There's something about the use of routine in that. Got a few more things to think about, but now that we've looked at classroom 1, classroom 2, why don't you just jot down a note for yourself? Why don't we go into a little quiet so that silence can do the heavy lifting for us? You know, what's a takeaway for you? What's a takeaway for us at Concepts? It's probably good for you to think individually and collectively. This is a direct takeaway for me, but I think this is a takeaway for us, given what I know about my peeps here. Okay, so you know what makes sense, what's helpful, what questions, puzzles does this continue to elicit for us? Do some quiet writing so that that silence can do your heavy lifting. This is a moment to highlight note to self. I need to try this more. I need to do this more, less. Or you gotta find your footing. What's the next right enough step for you given your context? This is a moment to at least get your guts reaction around that. If you find a little pause place for stuff wherever you are, that's probably just about right. Bring it off the floor a little bit. Is anybody wanting to share, just in the spirit of teachers thinking out loud with each other, just given the experiences of getting this school up and going from those hours you spent together, and now that you've been making things live, now that we've had this week, anybody, could we get a couple of voices? What's on your mind here? What's the takeaway for you, or takeaway for us?
Right about thinking very carefully about the two routines, then you develop the pushing thinking. I was to use the routine as a push of the thinking of the learners, not as as you mentioned, as a motivation.
So that bit spoke to you.
Yeah. Think carefully, do some research, because that's what I did with the lab also. I was thinking about the more, then I changed it to step aside. I was thinking which one was the more appropriate one.
How about someone else? Takeaway for you, takeaway for us.
My takeaway is that we always have to have the understanding of the activity. So why are we doing this? So we have to have both whys, not just have the activity for the sake of it. So we know where we went to get with that.
Yeah, it's hard to make thinking visible if I don't know what I want to make thinking visible for, or with, or through. Yeah, thanks, Julia. And if you'll turn it that way.
No, and as you said, it's not the DT routines are not ornaments, but they are not the activity in itself as well. Let's not do Connect Extend Challenge because we want kids need to do Connect Extend Challenge. So what's behind it? Where do we want to get there? It's like, it's a buzz you take. Let's say, like, it's a tool that you use to get somewhere else.
Yeah. And that's a good way of conceiving of that. I suppose I haven't even thought about it in this. I mean, I have thought about thinking routines as tools, as structures for patterns of behavior. That's familiar. But how you just phrased that, Julia, made me think about, like, okay, so I'm going to do this Connect, Extend, Challenge activity. Okay, maybe I put myself in the place and say, well, if I were going to do that, if our school had never done anything with that, never heard about this work, like, what would I normally do? Okay, well, I would do this activity in this way. Okay, so then why this tool challenge appealing to me? So that it's not just an activity, but it's a vehicle for, I don't know, I'm playing around with that because activities come and go, but tools, it's not like I use a tool once and then I'm done with it. Like, whenever I'm trying to build something, like, I have heard teachers do that with thinking routines. Oh, I can't do the claim support question again because we've already done that this term. Right. So they're conceiving of it as like an activity, but it's like, but no, I never say that about a hammer. Oh, I can't use that hammer again because I used the hammer when I built the bookcase. Now I can't use it again. No, you use it when it's needed. So maybe if the tendency is right, I am trying to figure out what's worth understanding. I mean, I be biased towards taking action. You guys are taking action. I think that's a good thing. Maybe understanding, I'm going to try to get as clear as I can up front. And sometimes I thought that's what I was understanding until, I get to the other side of that. So, but I also think about the idea of, the routines. Can I anticipate in why this tool? What might help us build? Many of my observations so far this week, and again, I wasn't in everybody's classroom, so I only know what I experienced here. I think it makes sense for a lot of you to use routines to launch into something, to get started with something. But maybe going back to Conrad's, but using routines to be input, a push through something, rather than just to get us started into our topic. But as we go through the topic, those routines become that sort of pushing along with the thread, if you will. These are all things that we could have had this day in February, but I don't think it would make sense so much. Something would make sense, but now that you've got some experience, I'll say this, and then I'll help organize the rest of our afternoon. The selection, the positioning of thinking routines matters. It just does. It's not just are we using routines, but how are we positioning them? What role are they playing? What role am I playing? What role are the kids playing? Oh, wow, there's a lot of complexity there. But what do I want my students to get out of using this tool, get out of the lesson, get out of the unit? What do I want to get out of it? If I have kids make thinking visible this way, what will be interesting for me? Curious about this. Another thing, it's hard to think and wonder when there isn't much to think and wonder about. Well, thanks for coming across the ocean, Mark, and telling us that, or across the sea to tell us that. You've just stated the obvious, Mark. Yeah, but I've walked in your shoes, and when you read those chapters 7 and 8, you might come across a guy named Mark Church, and it was the younger, more or less jaded, or I dreamed big dreams back then. You will see. My first use of routines were pretty disastrous, right? So I have a lot of empathy for you because I've been there. And I don't want you to lose hair like I did. So it's hard to think and wonder when there isn't much to think and wonder about. Big ideas aren't illuminated, handled some way. And there's something about thinking, and a lot of you have been cluing in on this already, which just pleases me. Pleases me just because I've been in some places where they never get to this sort of aha, and you're already aha in this regard. There's something about thinking being dynamic and connected, not one way and static, that's important to recognize. Content being decorated with thinking, that's different than content, different then the thinking leveraging thinking opportunities, and the thinking opportunities leveraging content, right? So how do the connections and extensions act as a lever to get us deeper into inclusivity? And what does it mean to be an inclusive community? How does another perspective on inclusivity give us more reasons to connect and extend? Or to see, to think and wonder, or to step inside. Now, how does stepping inside that give us more ways to come back into our topic of being an inclusive community, or take out inclusive community and put in, you know, our rights and responsibilities to the environment, or how can we keep ourselves healthy, or whatever topic may be. Guys, it's going to be time for lunch, so we're going to organize that way. I realized this day together is a little different than our February day. This day has been a lot of reflection. I mean, we've been active and trying some different things. Certainly, if you've not done generate, sort, connect, elaborate, or, well, people have done that. Connect, extend, challenge, used to think, now I think. I mean, we've been playing around with routines. I did announce them in that second one, but in fact, we just let them scream for themselves for a while there. So we've been active, but it has been very reflective. When we come back from lunch, I don't have an eloquent way to kind of put this one out there. So there has been some, we're getting kids to ask lots of questions, but then how do we handle these questions? I know that was in some conversations I had with some other folks throughout the week in various formats. So I want to put a tool or two in your hands so you have something new on the table to maybe work with. And then I also want to do another little processing with your ideas for taking your work forward and getting you together in a collaborative space to chart out kind of what's my, between June to July sort of plan, and then what will be my August and September plan, so that, you know, we can just keep our forward momentum. So we'll get some new tools on the table, not a lot of new tools, but some, and then take your ideas, and I think that's going to lead us up into our afternoon. So having said that, Priscilla, it is
101.
101. I was so close that time. We'll come back at 2.
That sounds perfect.
And then we'll go to about 3:45, 3:50, something like that. So Priscilla, do we have any directions for lunch?
No, you guys are off on your own. You're welcome to enjoy some of the food that we have out here. So we still have breads and bojangis and all that. Enjoy some of that. We have some new snacks that will be put out.